welcome to another Those Crazy Games vlog. I'm Mark Kinney. Glad you're still with us. Still. Next week's episode will be another big media thing, assuming that I don't throw a Q&A in between this and something else, in which case there might be a board game involved. I don't know yet. We'll see. If I didn't throw a Q&A in before this, then that's the order they're in. I shouldn't even say that at this point, honestly. This is another kind of unscripted thing, but I did keep some notes because I wanted to make sure I stayed on task for this one. Because what I'm going to talk about in this vlog is stuff that I'm not going to cover. And I'd said a few things in the original vlog. And there are a few more specific things in this particular list. And I didn't want to turn it into a full episode one episode of Atop the Fourth Wall in Kara went through a bunch of things that the specific comics that he was never going to review, even though he did go back and do one or two of them later on. But, I guess things can change depending on what. Some of these that I have here, I've got 5 different ones on this list, and most of them are more general categories. But there's at least one specific thing that I never intend to touch on this show. And we'll go right into the list here. The 5th one, of course, is the one that I mentioned on the original vlog that opened up the show. And that is media without a gaming connection to it. Now, maybe on down the line I might do a whole other show with that kind of thing, or started adapting the whole how to use your movies in gaming thing, like Ken did with his old screenplay segment, or the blowing up the movies or whatever. But honestly, if it gets to that point, I'll probably start a whole different show to do those movies. And a lot of everybody does that. That's why I want to stick kind of with the gaming focus on here, because you've got the games, you've got the media, and sometimes those mix together in interesting ways, and so there you go. That's, but just because a lot of gamers like a movie, I mentioned before Big Trouble in Little China being one of those, or I've heard people say Buckaroo Banzai is a gaming movie. And while that's great, I'm not going to cover those unless I have absolutely nothing else going on. Now, granted, the connection can be very, very tenuous, and there's going to be at least one of those. I don't know if I'm going to get to it before the end of the year, but certainly if this keeps going through 2016, it'll show up in there somewhere. And I'll probably mention it when I get to it, but well, of course I'll mention it when I get to it. I'll probably mention that it's the really, really tenuous one when I get to it, and you'll probably have guessed that anyway. But sort of related to that point is my second point, and that is I'm not going to do original media from which games have been derived. And what that means is, for example, Star Wars has had all kinds of games done about that. Babylon 5 has had 3 role-playing games and 1 Starship Combat game. Star Trek has had God knows how many different games released dealing with it. Doctor Who, I've got a bunch of various licensed things, Marvel superheroes, DC heroes, I can't even. There are so many. That doesn't mean that I'm going to review Star Wars, or Babylon 5, or Doctor Who, or any of those. I might make reference to them in the course of reviewing their particular games, but I'm not going to review the source media itself. For one thing, that kind of falls into the first category again. But I have enough stuff as it is to do, and it'll all work out there. Like I said, it's enough to get the games in there, because sometimes it's a matter of the difference between the games and the original media. And even though licensees do tend to try to be careful to have a good experience come out of the things they've been licensing, sometimes it doesn't work. And we'll get into some of that as we go into those. So that's category 2. Category 3 are all of those damned computer and console games that somehow got licensed from a tabletop game. And there are all those SSI games for the SSI Dungeons and Dragons games, Baldur's Gate and all that. You've got Neverwinter Nights, you've got endless parade of them, even back to the in television. They had, I think it was even called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons on that. I don't have time. I neither have the time nor the inclination to go through an adventure computer game to do a suitable review for these. Go bug Spoony about that. That's more his beat anyway. If you haven't seen his big Ultima retrospective, go watch those and you'll see. Yeah, he's the guy to do those. And yeah, I'm sure I'll get a great reaction out of that, like he knows who I am. But I don't have time to dig into all that. I don't have the proficiency to hook up an Intellivision to an HD TV. I can look it up on the internet, I'm sure, whatever. I've got enough stuff to do with the stuff that I'm already lining up. Okay, so console games, computer games, there's some neat stuff, and it's possible if there's something really, really outstanding and easily played, I might make an exception to that. But in general, no, I'm not. That's not going to be my thing. Number 2, podcasts. I'm not reviewing gaming podcasts. These people are my friends for the most part. I've always been big about encouraging people to get into podcasting, to get out there, get their voices heard, to do their thing. And I'm not going to go giving them the treatment here. No, just not. And plus, again, a lot of these ones have been going on for 100 episodes plus anyway. So even if I was disposed to riff on someone's podcast, there's so damn many of them. And these are people, like I said, these are people that I work with. These are my peers. No, I'm just not going to do that. And that brings us to the last one, and this is the very, very specific one. Fatal. Those of you who are not familiar with it, there is a role-playing game out there called Fatal. It's actually an acronym, F-A-T-A-L. Which I believe more recently, in an attempt to kind of freshen up its reputation, I guess, I think they actually called it From Another Time, Another Land, or something like that. The original one was From Fantasy Adventure to Adult Lechery, maybe? And now, the subject matter, I'm not necessarily shying away from. There's plenty of games with the whole sexual component to them that I'll probably end up talking about at least some of, because some of them are badly done and deserve it. Some of them aren't and just, whatever. There's always that whole, is this game really a good idea? And in Fatal's case, it was definitely not, for all kinds of reasons. And the thing is, it sounds like the perfect thing to cover, right? Well, it was for a couple of guys named Darren McLennan and Jason Sarton, who did a review of this game on RPG.net. And I encourage you to go and read their review there, because they did the definitive takedown of Fatal, and I really don't think there's anything I could possibly add to it. Were I disposed to go some of the places I would have to go to review Fatal. I mean, seriously, it's that bad. I have actually seen it. It's that bad. So that's the list. The 5 things that I will not cover on this show. And I hope you understand when I say I'm not covering some of those things. I hope you'll understand why, and I hope that you'll work with me on some of this. And like I said, there may be minor exceptions here and there. There will not be an exception on the last one. But yeah. So assuming that there wasn't a Q&A before this, I'd like to do the next one as a Q&A, the next vlog. So if you have questions, comments that you would like a response to, or whatever else, you can drop them in the comments of this video, and I will get to those next time. Otherwise, I will find something to talk about, I'm sure, because I can certainly rattle on, can't I? Anyway, I'm Mark Kinney. This has been Those Crazy Games. I hope you'll stay tuned and keep rolling crits.